If we thought of two scenarios here, let's think of, okay, I used myself as an example before, so let's just use me, continue using me here. Protein in my diet coming from plants, but consuming above the RDA, more towards the level that has been shown to kind of optimize hypertrophy, which I appreciate is a very different area of science than what you're interested in here. So we, as you alluded to, we could be talking about people with very different goals. So it can be hard to compare these directly sometimes. But if we think of two scenarios here, so one is myself consuming that diet and not doing any form of resistance training. And the other is consuming the same diet but doing resistance training, breaking down muscle. And I'm wondering if when you pair it with a lifestyle that has that resistance training and you get that muscle breakdown, do you get the leucine sort of activating these growth pathways more preferentially in muscle tissue? Or do we have any idea of, with tracer studies or anything like that, of looking at, okay, after you do a workout and you have a very high leucine meal, what percentage of that leucine goes to sort of increasing IGF-1 and activating mTOR in muscle tissue, as opposed to floating around the body and potentially driving growth in precancerous tissues?
I don't think you want to transform your audience into biochemists, but I can tell you that we did that, right? So we, in a cancer clinical trial in Italy, so we took a lot of women that were on a hormone therapy and cancer therapy, and then we put them on a fasting mimicking diet together with the therapy. But then, because we were worried, this fasting mimicking diet, these 5 days of fasting, like let's say nutrition, happened every month or so, right? So we were worried about loss of muscle mass, and so what we did was to give them a video where they could do muscle training, and then in between we gave them a Mediterranean diet. I argue, because of what I was saying earlier, I argued that there shouldn't be a Mediterranean diet; it should be my longevity diet, so that we wouldn't have help the cancer cells stay alive and grow. The doctors at the oncology hospital argued that they didn't like it's too much. We're gonna give a Mediterranean diet. And what happened was very interesting. Was the women kept gaining muscle mass, right? So of course, in that case, it was a bad idea. But the training, even with the fasting, even with just a Mediterranean diet that was not very high in protein, but sufficient protein. This, let's say moderate protein intake. It was not a low protein intake. But with the moderate protein intake, the 20 minutes, I think it's 20 minutes a day of very, very light muscle training, and they kept gaining lean body mass. My point is that you don't need very much proteins and to get the muscle and at the same time get the benefits. And so now our leucine is distributed between muscle and the potential target of cancer. I mean, that's an extremely complicated world that you don't want to think about that. You want to think more about, how do I keep my protein intake and protein profile vegan and low, vegan enough, right? Because then everybody's going to be vegan. But let's say, and this is why I preach pescatarian diet, right? But how do I keep it vegan enough and low protein enough, but at the same time get as much muscle as I want, right? These women, for example, they probably didn't even want, and that was my argument with the oncologist, right? They didn't want to gain muscle mass. They wanted to stay the same, right? So there was no reason to give them between 1.2 and 1.5 grams per kilogram a day, right? We could have kept it much lower, and I think they will have stayed steady, and in that case, it would have been a much better idea. Now, if you are trying to gain muscle mass, then yeah, you could have gone to, let's say, a fairly plant-based, maybe 1.2 grams. I would say that seriously doubt somebody does the experiment, and the experiment has already been done, by the way, as I mentioned earlier. So I don't think you're ever going to see any improvements going above 1.2, no matter what, right? So, I mean, unless you're really talking about Olympic training, and maybe there is like a very specific super protein loaded period that is going to help you build very quickly. But those studies that I mentioned before suggest that 30 grams per training period we're optimizing muscle mass. muscle synthesis.